Okay, thank you very much. I'm a neurologist, not a geneticist, and the lecture should have been given by Stella Mitrani Rosenbaum, who is here in the picture, my colleague, but she's in some family issue, and this is Iris Eisenberg. You will soon hear why I'm mentioning her. Well, what is GNE myopathy? This is an adult onset chronic myopathy, which I first described more than 30 years ago. And when I first described it, it was in Persian Jews. Through work of Iris Eisenberg as a PhD student in Stella's lab, we found that the disease is caused by recessive inheritance in the mutations of a GNE gene, and this gene encodes a bifunctional enzyme in the sialic acid metabolism. When the gene was found, it turned out that this is a worldwide disease. It had several names: hereditary inclusion body myopathy in the Western world, distal myopathy with ringed vacuums in the Asian world, and IBM2 in some other terminology. Now we know that there are more than 160 mutations, which the commonest is this one, M743T, which was first found by us and described in the Persian Jews. So just a word about this mutation. It is present in all 150 Middle Eastern Jewish patients with GNE myopathy that originate in the region that is covered from Uzbekistan to Egypt, but mostly in Persian Jews. It was not found in a family with GNE myopathy from India, a Jewish family. We also found it in 4 Karaite families of Egyptian origin. Karaites are a Jewish sect. They are dispersed in several places, including non-Jews that converted. This is difficult history, but the ones that live in Israel are coming from the Egyptian source. Recently, my colleague from Paris, Anthony Ortiz-Beria, has found that there is a cluster of patients living in Iran of today. Many of those are Baha'is, with the same, which are homozygous for the same mutation. And interestingly enough, very early in our gene search, we have identified families, and we now have more, that are Arab Muslims, either Bedouins from the Negev area or 5 Palestinian families. Just a word of a note, the Bedouins and the Palestinians do not share the common origin genetically and historically. And also one Tunisian family, which was described by Hentati, and then Andoni has found several in various Gulf countries. There are probably Palestinians who went to work there. In compound heterozygous, this mutation was described twice, but this is the commonest mutation, and this is the cluster. Well, the way we found the gene in the old times, it took us 5 years, and for the younger generation was the old positional cloning, where you took chromosomal markers, and you will find if there is a linkage disequilibrium between those markers, and it took us 5 years, what today would have taken 5 months, or maybe 5 weeks if you were lucky, and slowly the disease was mapped to chromosome 9, and then to a certain disease interval, and then you find the physical mapping and you try to narrow it. I'm mentioning it because it will be important for trying to age this mutation, because very slowly, before we identified the gene, before Iris has identified the gene, we came down to a certain haplotype, the HIVM haplotype, which was a 700 kilobases on chromosome 9. This haplotype was around the GNE gene. At that time, we didn't know that that the disease is related to the GNE. It had 11 identical markers unchained, and it was present, as we knew in 1998, in all the Middle Eastern Jewish patients, and in 2 Arab families. By then, we had only 2, which I identified them on clinical basis. The disease, I will not dwell into it, being a neuromuscular expert, but you can make the diagnosis either in a tent in a Bedouin village, because it has certain clinical features which are unique. And that supported the founder theory. So I then postulated that the Middle Eastern cluster is probably before Islamic time, that it is about 1300 years old. I was wrong by a bit, as you will see. Now, this is not a secret map of the attack of Israel on Persia. This is, in fact, just a reminder that in the Iranian plateau, the Persian plateau, it has had Jewish settlements very, very early in the history, after the fall of the Israel monarchy and then the Judea monarchy at the end of the first temple. So they spread around this region, which is, and they will remain in isolation for many centuries. So I try to date the mutation edge. Well, first of all, curiosity, does it fit the known history? Is it truly a Jewish disease? Because at least I claim that this is a Hadassah-made disease, because I describe the clinical features, and Stella Rosenbaum also works at Hadassah, found the gene defect. So is it really something unique? And when did it spread to the regional area and non-Jews? So when did the mutation occur? Well, the mutation age estimation, as I said, I'm not a geneticist, is based on the decay of the linkage, disequilibrium between the 10 flanking markers that we had beyond the 700 kilobase haplotype. This is the physical map that we had, I think, in 1998 or 1999. This is the critical region from which emerged the gene identification, but we had partly linked markers here. And there are ways to do it which are way beyond me, but we were approached by Roberto Colombo from Milan, who was an expert in determining the age of mutation. He, in fact, was involved in a terrible car accident, and we lost touch with him. We have the manuscript ready. He never responded since then. We just heard that he was involved in a crash accident. So we have the manuscript, so it was never published. But he did all the steps that are necessary, using those markers and making all these complicated calculations. And he came up with this figure. And he came up that the age of the haplotype, not of the mutation, the whole haplotype, is about 105 generation, plus, minus, and so on. If you assume, and these assumptions are always assumptions, that the generation is about 25 years, then this comes down to a haplotype that was generated about 2,600 years ago. Does it fit the history? Well, we know that the common ancestor lived about 600 BC, and yes, it is within the well-known history of the Persian Jews and this region of the world. What do we know about it? We know that the Persian kings ruled the Middle Eastern region, especially when the great conqueror, King Cyrus, whom we and the Persians called Koresh, This is King Koresh. And in Iran they call him Koresh, otherwise it's his name is Cyrus. And he conquered the whole of this region which I showed you till the conquest of Alexander about 33 BC. King Cyrus or Koresh allowed all nationalities to return to their homeland. And this is the Koresh's decree. He mentions the Jews. If you don't believe me, you can read it for yourself. This is a copy of the decree which is in the British Museum, and the British Museum was supposed to return it to Iran, but guess why it's still there. That's not the only problem in Great Britain, as I understand nowadays, but it's still being discussed. And the movement to the Middle East has started around that time. This is what we produce, and this is based on the book of Professor Netzer, who was the expert on Persian Jewish community. And probably many of you know that about 450 BC, towards starting the second Jewish temple, Ezra and Nehemiah have moved in to build it. So it does seem to fit the Jewish history and the migration and the possibility that the disease was brought in from the Persian area to the Middle East. When did it move into the Islamic world? We don't know. We know that many Jews were forced to convert to Islam in the 70s century by Shiites persecutions at that time. So this is one possibility. Or the other possibility is that people did not obey all the rules of who you get married to and who you don't. And of course, there is another question which is being discussed by historians far more knowledgeable than me, is who are the Baha'is, who many of those, this is why those of you who don't know, this is one of the newly religions generated in Persia, persecuted. They left Persia, and the wonderful gardens that you see here in Haifa are the gardens of the Baha'i. And there is some suggestive evidence, and maybe this is another one, but don't base it on this, that these were Jews who have created in the 19th century a new religion. So this is a little story about another community which seems to have been neglected within all the discussion of Ashkenazi Jews. Thank you very much.